Hello and welcome to this channel. In today's video I want to take you through the correlation coefficients. So I will explain what correlation coefficients are and also give an example and use the example to help you interpret the correlation coefficients. So correlation is a term that is used to describe a linear association between two continuous variables. And correlation does not mean a cause and effect. That means that when you talk about correlation, we do not suggest that a change in one variable causes a change in the other variable. It is only that there is an association between the two variables, which does not mean a cause and effect. And when you run your correlation analysis, you usually get a value that we refer to as a correlation coefficient. And a correlation coefficient is a term or a statistical term that is used to describe the strength of the association between the variables. And there are two types of correlation coefficients. One, we have the Pearson's product moment correlation coefficient, and this correlation coefficient is usually used for data that is normally distributed. Whereas the Spearman's rank correlation coefficient, which is the other type of correlation coefficient, can be used for data that is skewed. That means that the data is not normally distributed. So the Spearman's rank correlation coefficient can work for data that has that is skewed or that is not normally distributed, whereas for Pearson's product moment correlation, it can only be used for normally distributed variables. And when you run your correlation analysis, the value of the correlation coefficients that you get, they usually range between -1 and +1. So you can either get values that are negative but cannot go beyond -1, and values that are positive up to +1. And a correlation coefficient that is 0, that is, if you get a correlation coefficient that is 0, that would mean that there is no association between your variables. But if you get correlation coefficients that are -1 or +1, then that would mean that there is a perfect association between the variables. And when you get a correlation coefficients that are positive, that would mean that when one variable increases, then the other variable also increases. And that would say that the variables have a direct relationship, or they are directly related. So that would mean that when one increases, the other one also increases. That is for a positive coefficient. But if you get a negative coefficient, that would mean that when one variable increases, or when the value of one variable increases, then the other variable goes down. And that relationship is described as inverse, or the variables are inversely related. That is for a negative coefficient. So we've said that a correlation coefficient is a value or a term that is used to describe the strength of the association or the correlation between the variables. So if you get values that are too close to -1, that would mean that the variables have a strong negative correlation. Remember that negative sign would mean a negative correlation. And if the value that you get is very close to -1, then that relationship or that correlation is strong. Then it is a strong negative correlation. And values that are closer to +1, that means they have a positive correlation, and also that correlation or that association is strong. And that means that the two variables have a strong positive correlation. In this video, I have come up with some examples that will help you understand the correlation coefficient and also how you interpret it. So in this example, I have used SPSS to learn the correlation analysis, and in this first example, I am running the correlation between income and consumption. So I want to test what is the correlation or what is the association between income and consumption. And after running the correlation analysis, you find that the correlation coefficient is positive 0.759. So that would mean that there is a positive correlation between income and consumption. Also note that 0.759 is close to +1, and that would mean that the correlation between income and consumption is strong. So we would say that there is a strong positive correlation between income and consumption. So that is for a positive correlation. Other times you say that you get a negative value. For example, in this example, I have used the correlation between consumption and price of goods. And you find that the value or the correlation coefficient in this example is negative 0.897. So that means that the correlation or the association between price of goods and consumption is negative. So we would say that there is a negative correlation between price of goods and consumption. And also note that this value also is very close to -1. That means that that correlation is strong. So there is a strong negative correlation between the price of goods and consumption. So that would mean that if the price of goods goes up, then consumption goes down because the correlation coefficient is negative. But in our previous example, if the value of income goes up, then also the value of consumption goes up because the correlation is positive. Other times you say that you find that the value or the correlation coefficients that you get are not as strong. They are not close to -1 or close to +1, and that means that they are closer to 0. Then we would say that the more or the closer the value is to 0, the weaker the correlation becomes. So as we move towards 0, then the correlation between the variables becomes weaker. And in this example, I was running the correlation between the price of goods and income. And you find that the correlation coefficient here is negative 0.091. And you find that this value is very close to 0. It's very close to say that there is no correlation. Then we would say that the two variables, that is the price of goods and income, have a very weak correlation between, or there is a very close or very weak correlation between the two variables, that is the price of goods and income. So that is how you interpret your correlation coefficients. Don't forget that the correlation coefficients range between -1 to +1, and the closer we get to -1 or to +1, the stronger the correlation, and the closer we get to 0, the weaker the correlation becomes. So that is it for today. I hope that you find this information to be helpful, and if you like such content, please do not forget to like this video, also share the video, and also do not forget to subscribe to this channel so that you keep getting notification for such and more information or more content